Good morning, everyone. Thank you for braving the weather today to come and join us for this session on the most beautiful berries. Just before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. So, we have no planned fire drills this morning, much like we didn't yesterday, um, but we still did. So, if the alarm sounds, please do make your way safely to one of the exits. We've got two at the front, either side here, and then one out the back, the way that you came in, and the marshalling point is at the front of the building in the car park. We do encourage you to participate in the session today and ask lots of questions of our fantastic speaker. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can submit questions through Slido or go to the website and input the code. If you can't access Slido, we will have a roving microphone with Georgia at the front there, and we're happy to get you to ask those questions. So without further ado, our speaker for this session is Kirstie Campbell. Kirstie studied chemistry at the University of Edinburgh before changing direction for 15 years to pursue a career as a humanitarian aid worker with the World Food Programme, the ICRC and IMC. It was during this time that she came across the incredible properties of Seabuckthorn berries, and on returning to Scotland, wanted to understand how it is both abundant and underappreciated. She set up Seabuckthorn Scotland (CIC) in East Lothian to celebrate its myriad of uses both for humans and the natural environment. So, Kirstie, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, are we going to turn the lights off behind, or is it a little bit? Can everyone see that clearly? Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you. So 1 second. So I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour today about Seabuckthorn. There'll be 4 parts just so that you know where we're at, because there's going to be quite a lot of information. I hope that you'll be able to follow it and that you'll find it interesting. Um, we'll have questions at the end, and there'll also be a tasting at the end. But as I say, we'll start off with an overview, tell you a bit about the history of it, some about the benefits, and then sum up with a little bit about what we're doing as well. So, what is sea buckthorn? You see here the Latin name, Hippophae rhamnoides, refers to shining horse. And this is because Alexander the Great, when he was on the return from battle, his horses were exhausted, and he let them out as if basically out to the woods, expecting them to die there. And they came back instead with the rumor, different legends, whether it was shiny eyes or a shiny coat. Either way, shiny horse or shining horse name struck there. Sallowthorn is also another name that's been used within Scotland for it. Perhaps because after the frost, the berries go kind of pale colour, quite sallow there. Or also in East Lothian, the baked bean tree. This is due to as you'll see within the talk, there's different shapes of berries, and one of them rather resembles a baked bean. I'm not going to. Have we got any Gaelic speakers who want to try to pronounce the Gaelic? Well, maybe you can tell me after how you pronounce it. I say, well, I'm going to touch on quite a lot of these points within it, but we've got deciduous and dioecious in terms of male and female, willowy leaves. They really do resemble willow leaves. Extremely thorny, as you'll see. They can survive in a really quite a variety of different environments, as you can see here, but they need sunlight. They help to fix the dunes, and I'll tell you about the roots and the rhizomes. And I'll show you the thing that excites me the most, and perhaps you the least, but wait until you see it, the world of trichomes. There we are. So these are the 2 different varieties that we have in East Lothian. The one on my right, as you can see, the thorns, I mean, that's my finger, which, it's quite long. They're quite a good defense they have. And the one on the left, which you can't, I mean, it's slightly difficult angle, but you can see they're more ovoid compared to these, which are round. So one of them we think is a imported variety, and the other one we think is the native variety. And there we are. See here. People have been asking on some of the forums about pollination and how you know the different types of the male from the female. And if you have a look, I don't know if you can see clearly enough here, there's a difference between the buds here, the male buds, which have quite a lot of clusters on them, whereas the female, the only way I've seen it described, bear with me, camel toe. Okay, so that's the female, and the male has a bit more kind of clustered, quite a lot of little bubbles on. And there are two types of flowers. You have the male and the female flower. They're basically green. You're not going to notice them, but the males throw out the pollen, and the females shit. They have to be in close proximity to each other, the male and the female bushes, in order to be able to catch the pollen. And one male can pollinate several females in its vicinity. And the important thing is that they have to have full sunlight. It's very, very important. They can put up with a lot of things. They need full sunlight. There we go. Next one here. That's just another photo here. So female, probably a slightly better example here. And these, if you look at these little, they're almost like little cones that the males will have. And that's quite distinctive. So if you've got plants and you want to know if it's male or female, I think this is quite a good way to go to see. Roots. Now, in East Lothian, the roots has been a very important part of why Seabuckthorn has been used. They have these amazing cluster root systems, which, if we look here, we get an idea of how they go with these nitrogen-fixing Frankia bacteria nodules on them, which you can see a little bit here. So they're able to capture atmospheric nitrogen and carbon, you name it, and store it in the roots. The roots can also absorb quite a lot of water, and they'll swell up in order to kind of hold the groundwater together. So that's quite a benefit of having this amazing root system. These are some of the areas of erosion in East Lothian where we have them. Incredibly long roots. If you look at the length of these, I mean, we're talking the sandbank is probably about the height of here, and that's the roots coming down. It's actually quite true to size here. This one here, you can see I mean, they can really grow inside the rocks. That's another one on the beach. On the right here, you get an idea of how the rhizomes grow. So the roots will be under the ground like this, and you'll have these little sprouts that will come up like this, and that's how they will end up spreading and spreading and spreading if left to their own devices. You'll have a chance to see some seeds up close at the end, but what we've got here, if you have seeds, you won't know whether they're male or female unless they've been specially tested. You're pretty much 50% chance, as we say here. Um, you can do a range of different propagation for them, but just sort of to be aware until you know what you have, then it's quite difficult to know male or female unless you've actually got if you're taking a cutting. So be wary of anyone who promises you seeds without knowing what's going to come from it. So it has a huge history. Whilst in Scotland, I mean, certainly in mainland Scotland, apart from East Lothian, a lot of people really don't know what it is. They might have heard it on a few cooking programs, but other than that, it's not particularly well known. However, um, most famous ancient warriors have used it to give them strength. As I mentioned, got people like Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great, who both used it to feed their armies. I'm not quite sure whether the association is slightly tenuous, but it's a proven one. It's not. I hope it didn't encourage them marauding. I hope it gave them energy. We got the early, uh, I can't pronounce it, the marathon runners, shall we say that? The Greek athletes who used to do all their long distance running. They used to use sea buckthorn and oats as well. The Chinese Olympic team had it as their national drink for at least 2 years, including 2008. The first man into space from the Russians, Yuri Gagarin, had some sea buckthorn with cottage cheese in a tube as part of his space food. So it's rumored to have been the first ferry to space. And of course, Everest. I don't know if we have any seasoned Everest climbers here, but if we do, you might, if you had a nice Gurkha who helped you with altitude sickness, then you may have been given a mysterious orange drink, which was sea buckthorn. It's very helpful for sort of allowing more air in the lungs, and helping with the sort of high altitude. The Indian Army also use it. We got here. So anyone, I'll give you just a moment to read through those ones. Second. And so what we can essentially see here is that there's a very ancient connection between humans, hunter-gatherers onwards, and these berries. And it's a lot of it, it's a lot of it's in Asia with the Tibetan medicine, the Romans, the Greeks, certainly these ancient medical men, they all knew about it and they appreciated it. Um, and that comes down the Russian program. The amount of research the Russians and the Chinese have done in Seabuckthorn is absolutely extraordinary. I think they're last, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of patents that the Chinese have made of everything you can possibly imagine to do with Seabuckthorn. And the Russians used it after Chernobyl, for burns, radiation burns. They also, as well as bringing the cottage cheese sea buckthorn to space, they also brought the sea buckthorn oil to space as well, to help with sort of adaptation to difficult environment. Turkey University has a whole course dedicated to it. The Indian Army use the leaves to make biscuits that they eat on high altitude training. Um, as I say, there is an international sea buckthorn association that have a whole, I think it's about a week worth of talks, and it's in a different place every year. And it spans, from the Chinese, the Canadians, the Russians are out at the moment due to Ukraine, but they were generally, a very active part of the research. And I thought one of the nice things about it is there's a lot of sharing of research between these different countries. So the argument of native and non-native, it's maybe more suited to within mainland Scotland, as Nature Scot has a particular aversion to sea buckthorn, and has sort of unilaterally decided that it's not native and it should go. But I mean, in a lot of the literature, I mean, it's in Britain, it's native in Britain. You know, there's I'll go on a little bit more with it, but it's it's these are the definitions as they were. Um, we have here, as I can see at the top, I managed to find there was a pollen um, grain found up in Orkney, Yesnaby. There's again some. It was only about 1% that was there. So there's within the literature there is, a little bit of debate, um, whether they were necessarily part of the Arcadian flora, but there's certainly evidence there that they made their way there in the post-glacial period. So it's quite exciting. And you're basically seeing as the ice is retreating, It's not that they weren't in the north there. It's just that as the ice is retreating, they're popping up. Sea buckthorn is very much a pioneer plant. And of course, in the post-glacial period, the soil was not suited for a lot of plants. Here comes sea buckthorn that is suited to this environment perfectly, where it can essentially, spread as much as it wants to. It can produce the nitrogen it needs. It doesn't need much in order. It just needs a bit of sunlight. So it spread, and there was for some time there would have been a lot throughout the UK, but then in the succession would come the forests, and the forests then pushed it out to the sea. So this is when you then just see it around the coastal areas on the edges, near the sea, where the salty sea air and the sort of the sandy environment that other plants can't put up with. Also, the harsh winds coming in from the sea deter a lot of other plants. Whereas for sea buckthorn, it's absolutely delighted. It has, say, the perfect root systems and everything in order to survive there. So this is just so I was saying, we're talking 12, 5, between 10 and sort of 12,000 years BC. It's not bad. This is just in the reference of Sallowthorn, goes back to 9 AD in the borders. So again, it's certainly been around, despite what nature's got might think. Now, here we go. Exciting. If you ever look at sea buckthornberry, you'll notice it has a characteristic. It's almost like a dust upon it. This dust is, in fact, the tiny little foliate hairs or scales called trichomes. And they have different trichomes on the leaves and on the berries. And the trichomes play a very important role in terms of moderating the amount of sunlight, the amount of water, the amount of nutrients that go on within the berries. So whilst they might be something that when you're picking them, you might consider it as not important, it is actually incredibly important. And as they grow and they get more mature, they drop some of the trichomes as they don't need so many of them. I think they're quite beautiful under the sunlight. Yeah. There's also some great records in the botanical gardens. If anyone is interested, the herbarium have also many other digitized now samples of different plants throughout, particularly Scotland, that you can see this sort of trace back and see how how they've changed. And we are hoping to use some of these for one of the projects that we're doing with Harriet Watt to compare the DNA of these ancient plants to the ones that we have locally. There is another role of sea buckthorn. We talked a bit about the use of the roots to kind of hold the sand dunes together. But as I say, that doesn't work very well. Sorry about that. There's a very useful role of it to buffer against the wind that's coming in from the shore. Let's just let you read that. And there was a newspaper article from around this time, and there was Earl Thomas, who was there. He was the husband of Helen Hope, and he claimed to have set about the work in a purpose-like manner and with a knowledge of woodcraft somewhat extraordinary. When we recollect, it was in the early 1700s. About high tide mark, he planted a thick hedge or cover of sea buckthorn, which, revelling in the loose sand, soon took firm hold and spread rapidly, whilst throwing up its lanceolate leaves, now adorned with yellow berries, to a height of 12 to 14 foot. Behind this barrier, Scots fir, beech, and oak were planted. The outermost ranks of the forest trees do not count for much, that they're thin, stunted, starved like plants, but they improve as you advance. At only a few yards from the buckthorn hedge, you will find straight, healthy, well-grown timber. Now we now know it was actually Helen Hope, his wife, who did the planting of the Seabuckthorn. So that's why she's got a photo here. But he was very happy at the time to take the credit for her work. There's a little bit on Orkney. Sorry, there's a lot of words. Don't don't get overwhelmed by here. But there's basically the same recommendations I found here were made by James Hoy at Gordon Castle. This idea, um, basically back in 1806, of sea buckthorn potentially being used in the same role for whatever reason. He's saying might be tried, but elder would be better. I mean, and certainly the the sea buckthorn is one of the most wind resistant. It really can tolerate very, very strong winds. Being pushed right over and back. Um, uh, is everyone all right with that? Anyone want more time with that slide, or we'll keep going here? Okay. Oh, sorry. So again, this is the static dunes. In here, it's a list of the birds actually here. It's a very, very useful resource for the birds, and I've got here the John Harrison, who's the ranger at Aberlady Bay. He said if sea buckthorn were to be eradicated at the nature reserve, this would likely result in 4 species: blackcap, lesser white-throat, willow warbler, and bullfinch, and a large decline in 16 species: song thrush, redwing, fieldfare, carrion crow, magpie, sedge grasshopper warbler, sorry, blackcap, wood pigeon, blue-tit, robin, wren, dunnock, chaffinch, linnet, and reed bunting. Um, Not only does it has an important role in East Lothian for the wintering birds, but also the birds will eat a part of it. Perhaps some of them will eat the outside, the skin, and then they'll spit out the seed. Some of the other ones will eat the seed and regurgitate it, and then there'll be different animals that will then continue to use it. So there's a very interesting food chain that goes all the way down. Other species like pheasants and grouse are also known to feed on sea buckthorn berries. And amongst the small mammals, there's mice, voles, rabbits, and squirrels that are all attracted to sea buckthorn berries, which gives them obviously energy and essential nutrition. And the deer also like to use it as a scrub to hide. This is the wonderful gentleman, Frank Tyndall, who was the first countryside planning officer and set up the Ranger Service that started East Lothian and has spread throughout the country. He was a great pioneer, and he did a lot of propagation of sea buckthorn, which is why we have so much. But he was quite an amazing chap, and he used to travel as well to Norway and back with sea buckthorn, I think, down his trousers by all accounts. I'm not sure I would do that, having dealt with the spikes. This on the left, there's a very specific, it's like a bracket fungus that grows on sea buckthorn that you won't find on any other trees. Back to a little bit on Orkney. I was delighted to be able to visit some of the plants that have been planted, and this is the successful ones here, just out at the university. They had, they got some supposedly native varieties, which were from Cumbria, and then he'd had 5 different Russian varieties as well. Some of them work better than others. It's something, if people have got experience trying to grow them here, I'd be quite interested to, maybe we could try and pool the knowledge and see if we can get somewhere with the lessons learnt. But there are some recommendations here if anyone is looking for. I mean, the climate in Kent's obviously quite different, but David Eagle, who has been growing it as a farmer down in Kent, he's tried a lot of different varieties and had a lot of EU funding back before Brexit in order to support his projects. Um, so he's a very good resource. He's a very nice chap as well. Um, and he's currently getting some quite good German varieties, which are only €2 a go, so it's not too expensive to try. Did anyone try the Orkney wine with sea buckthorn? Got any hands here? I'd rather wish that I had. I don't know if it's still going on. But that's rather nice. I think we spotted, sorry, the photo's probably not brilliant. That's some by Lidl up here, and then some on Hoy. There's a whole two sides of hedge, which I was only able to look at on Google Earth, unfortunately. But I'd be very interested to see close to see whether the berries have come or whether they've been transported by the birds, perhaps. There we are. So a little bit on the benefits. 190 different active ingredients, um, or bioactive compounds that the berries contain. And that's just sort of as far as we know, they're pretty much still finding more of them. And that explains why in different cultures, there's a whole book in the botanics that is called Seabuckthorn, the miracle plant. I mean, in other countries, it's highly revered. It's almost worshipped. And then in certainly parts of East Lothian, when I first moved back here, where it was seen as this blight that you need to burn this and get rid of it, and it's prickly nuisance. Um, there's a huge amount of research that is being done. The highest vitamins that certainly we found is the vitamin C and the omega-7. Omega-7 is very good for dry eyes and so internal lubrication throughout all of your kind of what you say, all your systems, should we say, from your eyes down. Um, Vitamin A and E, omegas, also 3, 6, and 9, and B vitamins. There's lots of reports in terms of the different um, sort of medical applications. It's really worth looking into the specific, if you're suffering from a condition and you're wanting to see if Seabuckthorn can help, it's really worth looking specifically to see which part of the plant, because, as I say, for example, the bark contains 5-HTP, which is an antidepressant. The leaves, like an alcoholic tincture of the leaves, has been used by the Russians to help protect against full body radiation. But there's very much um, different activities in each one. Just to give you a little overview there, we've got loads of amino acids here. We've got 17 vitamins, 14 minerals. We got omega-9, as you mentioned, very strong antioxidant powers, polyphenols, all these important things. And as I like to call it, vitamin wine is also contained. So the last part of the talk, basically, we have been set up since 2018 in order to try to overcome this issue of, there's this amazing resource of which there is lots and lots of it growing in East Lothian, certainly, and other parts of Scotland. Let's appreciate it. Let's try and make as much use of it. Let's also share the information that we find and that other people find, so that Scotland can really build up common knowledge of how it can be useful to us. We've worked with quite a few different universities now, which I can show you on the next slide. And we're trying to use everything. And you can see in the tasting room, you'll see, when we make the juice, in fact, it might be on this one here. So when you make the juice, you have the pulp and the seed that's left over, because they're essentially, you've got the berry on the outside, you've got the seed in the middle, and there's juice. There's not really much to it. And it's quite a flimsy skin, so it's quite difficult to pick them as such. So the way that we harvest, we trim back the branches and freeze them. And then I kid you not, it's pretty much whacking it in the chest freezer with a large stick. But then you get berries, and you get the leaves, and then you get all the spikes and all the twigs that then need to be separated. But as I say, what we've got here, the woody material goes to biochar. Biochar is amazing stuff. I'll show you the kiln in one of the next slides. The pulp and the seeds we have been making oil out of it, and you can have a look. Also, you can try a bit on your skin if you're interested. We use supercritical CO2 extraction, which doesn't apply any heat or any chemicals at all. And there's a few local companies in around East Lothian who use those then in their different formulations. And even once you've done that, once you've taken the oil out, still you can make, you have a lot of fiber and protein in the remaining the pulp flour and the seed flour. And I've made some, correction, my mother has very kindly made some oat cakes, so she won't give me the recipe. She'll need to continue making them, which contain the Seabuckthorn seed flour, which you'll be able to try. If you dry the berries, you get a very different flavor, more kind of an earthy, umami sort of a flavor. We've got some those to try as well, and you can make tea from the leaves as well as alcoholic anti-nuclear juice as well. So these are just some of the different universities that we've worked with, and some of the different studies that we've been doing. That's gone slightly off the thing there, but I mean, there's so many different things to be done. Back at the time, the virology department at Edinburgh University, it was quite interesting because there was a bottle of I'd given them some juice, and then she said, "Oh, have you got some oil-free juice?" Because the color, the fluorescence was too high to actually use to test because they're testing for fluorescence. So I gave this lady Sam, who I met down at the beach at Wardy, actually, I'd given her some juice, and she'd taken it to the lab, and she'd left it out in the lab for about a year and forgotten about it. And then she suddenly got reminded about it, and she did these tests, and she said there was a 60% reduction in the replication rate. And it was like, but you've left it out. It's not been in the fridge. It's not got the oils in. But so there we go. And it was a very dilute sample as well. So it certainly, we know from that, certainly it packs a punch. But this is very exciting. This was the first kiln that Sustainable Thinking Scotland had for making biochar. And, it's an amazing way essentially, I don't know how many of you have heard it before, basically to take wood, pyrolyze it. It's essentially make it into charcoal, but it's keeping it's a closed loop system. So it's not releasing anything to the atmosphere. You can then either store the carbon and have that as a carbon store, which it will keep for a very long time. Or you can also use it for things like blue-green algae. It works as a sponge and it will soak up the excess things like nitrogen and potassium, and then you can then move it to where you want those nutrients to be used. Not a problem you have in Orkney because obviously you have the most fertile soil, I think, in the country. That's, but certainly from the carbon storage point of view, when you've got sea buckthorn that is growing quite wildly and quite a lot of it, it's a very quick way to grow a lot of hardwood in a place where a lot of other trees won't necessarily want to grow. This is just with our upcoming project with the DNA, as I mentioned before when we were looking at the slide there. It'll be very exciting to see which of them finally is the native. There we are. Just to close up, thank you very much for coming, and thank you also for the funding to be able to come here. It's been an absolute honour, and all of the amazing organisers. And if you'd like to think of any questions that I haven't covered, then I would welcome them. And please stay on to taste and to also, there's some nice samples of different wool dyes that can be made from different parts of sea buckthorn as well. And I've got some of the other studies if anyone's interested in looking at any of the medical sort of studies, just a few of them as an example. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Kirstie. That was absolutely fantastic. So interesting. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yep, right to the front.
Yes, thank you. It's a two-part question. Firstly, is it relatively easy to grow sea buckthorn from hardwood cuttings? And the second one was related to the interesting findings that you found that red species, endangered birds, are particularly protected. Is that because of the thorniness of the of the plant, or is it? Does it stop things like stoats, for example, which is a real problem here?
I actually got the expert on stoats in the audience. Where are you? You're hiding now. We've got the stoat ranger is in the back there. Okay. Come on, put your hand up. Is he hiding or is he left? I don't know. I can't see it.
He's maybe already at your samples.
I see the examples. Or he doesn't want to ask the question for me. I can't tell you on stoats. I can tell you when it comes to the thorns, things like, I mean, until the frost has come, it's really difficult to get at the berries because the spikes will stay really hard and very strong. So when I'm doing the harvest, I mean, my fingers are basically full of thorns for the entire time. So I would very much imagine it would be equally difficult for, big predators to get in there after the berries. The point that John was making with that list there was Nature Scott's idea of taking away the sea buckthorn. There's a huge number of them that use it as a food source, also as a habitat for nesting, um, as well. So it's sort of the mixed benefits. Also the cover that it produces as well. There are things like the long-eared owl that they've managed to find in Aberlady Bay, and the hardwood cuttings. I have to say, I haven't tried myself doing the cuttings yet, but the best resource I've found is in Canada. There's a couple of different things, and after the talk, if you remind me, I can find you the link because there's two different papers that they have uh, on sort of how to do it and the different types, so hardwood, and they've also got from the picture I showed, which had the rhizome and then the little sprouts up there. That's another way to propagate it. And then the seeds, you need to soak them. There's a certain process, but it's not too complicated. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Any other questions in the audience? Well, we've got a question here of how soon after planting can you expect to get berries?
As long as you've got your male and your female plants, which is important, then we're talking about 4 years, 5 years, something like that. I mean, you need a bit of time for them to establish themselves a little bit. And at first, you might get some quite a few larger berries. And as they progress, you'll get more of them growing up on the branch. I mean, they grow literally sort of almost stuck onto the branch. There's a very small stalk. So it is very difficult to kind of get under them. There are some countries that have some very nifty kind of a bit like, I don't know, the only way to describe it, one of the clay tools, like, that has a little wire hook on a bit of wood like this sort of and do a kind of net it around and squeeze it. Very time consuming, much easier to just trim it back. It likes a little bit of a trim. There. This gentleman here.
Just an observation about, is it a native species or is it not? There is pollen present on Shetland of Seabuckthorn about on 12,000 years.
Brilliant.
And just as you said, the sea buckthorn seems to come in as soon as the ice disappears in lots of places. So it's on the island of Gotland in the Baltic as soon as the ice goes away. But I think the clincher is that it's present in interglacial sites in Ireland. So that's from 125,000 years ago.
So which sites did you say in Ireland?
In Ireland,
Uh-huh.
yes, it's present at some of the interglacial sites.
Brilliant.
As
I think it's in the south. In the south, they've been trying to get rid of it, so it's quite good to I can take
yeah, so
these.
if it was there in the last interglacial,
Yeah.
then very likely it's a native of the British Isles.
There's this it's rather xenophobic idea with the definition of native, that it's like, okay, you have to be here and you've got to stay here. If you move, you're not Scottish anymore. Okay. And it comes, apparently, the whole thing, the idea of native plants comes from the way of treating people. But you think it's a pioneer plant, it's not supposed to stay there. It's supposed to be there to play this amazing role, as you said, improve the ground and so on. Push its way on, move along the way with its rhizomes, and hopefully leave a nice place for the woods to come in and other things to grow. Question at the back there.
Yeah, so while you're on your way up there, Georgia, we've got, what do you see as the future in terms of the use of sea buckthorn?
There are some very interesting studies that have been done on the use for things like chickens' eggs. If the chickens eat seaweed, they get this wonderful bright coloured yolks, and it's the same with sea buckthorn. I think that's quite an interesting application of improving the quality of their diets. And then I think generally in terms of really thinking about the right use for each byproduct, as you say, with the sea buckthorn, I think within this area there is amazing research being done, even also for salmon. There's talk of using sea buckthorn to improve the colour and the quality of the salmon, which is something that I haven't tried yet, and it really interests me a lot. So that's certainly from my point of view.
Yeah, you didn't say specifically, but I got the impression from your method of harvesting that the berries grow on second year wood, and that what if you just pick the berries off second year wood? Do they come again in the third year, or?
Yeah, so they exactly as you say, they grow on the second year wood. They would take if you pick them off, another one will still grow on that. And some people, quite a lot of foragers, traditionally will have harvested them after the frost, once they've turned white, and they become really, really squashy at this point. And they will, I kid you not, milk the bushes, despite the thorns, into a bucket. And I think it's not Bear Grylls, it's one of those, one of the other kind of uh, foraging chaps who did a YouTube video with this wonderful scientist, and and they were there, and they were busy putting it into this stinking. I mean, after the frost, it really smells very strongly. It starts to oxidize. I mean, the birds are eating it when it's almost alcoholic. It's really been fermenting quite strongly. Um, which in some ways I think is, I mean, some people, really pregnant women, quite like the smell of it. But for me, it's an off-putting thing, which is why we harvest it quite a lot earlier. And then we have to, as you say, do the trimming. Have I answered, or have I got lost on my answer? Is that sorry?
You,
Is that
no,
okay?
no, no, you answered. So you basically you cut off the second year wood,
Mhm.
complete with the berries, and then take the berries off the wood, and you let the first year wood mature, and the
Yeah.
next year that's the one that's got
So
the
you take
crop.
that's
You don't
yeah.
you don't bother trying to pick individual berries.
No.
And I got that impression anyway. I just wanted to
Mm.
clarify that. That's all. Thank you.
And we only take. I mean, I would say I only take about 10% of each bush in East Lothian. Uh, David Eagle takes a maximum of 30% any year off any one bush, because you're basically wanting, you're working your way around the plant so it can then regrow ready for next year. And if I'm harvesting, I tend to make sure enough light can get into the top, because the crown can get very thick, and then of course it blocks the sunlight, and the one thing sea buckthorn needs is sun. So just kind of keeping it quite well. Also, when it grows up, it produces lots of different off branches. So if you can train it up in the early days a bit, so that it sort of just goes into a V and then another V, rather than giving too much energy away as it's going up. Also removing some of the thorny branches just at the bottom that can, uh, it creates a better environment then, also for biodiversity if you let the light in. It does produce a very nitrogen-rich place below, and I have seen some wild potatoes growing underneath sea buckthorn in East Lothian. Unfortunately, the rangers weren't very happy about it at all. They stopped it because I thought that would be very interesting. Um,
Any other questions in the audience? Oh, one in the middle here, Georgia. So would you encourage our audience to grow sea buckthorn, or just forage for it if they were inclined to
would I?
test the berries or the leaves or
I
anything?
think it's definitely worth here. Um, the bushes that are around, I would certainly encourage you to make some tea. Take a few branches. There you are, Stoat. My Stoat friend, who was hiding. Um, yeah, so basically to take some leaves. Orkney University have got some berries. They're not very large. But if you're wanting to, to try them for something, you have to be aware that if you do plant it, it does spread if it's successful. And so you might want to have a little bit of community consultation, perhaps, about, is that a good thing or a bad thing? But if you're looking to have sort of to grow better timber, it would certainly be very interesting to try a pilot project here, because there's, I mean, great potential there also then for carbon store, and it's something the University of UHI, the York University are quite interested in. So it's worth having a chat with John, um, there, the economist.
You've sort of answered my question. I was going to ask, how vigorous is the plant? Would you recommend it for a garden, or should it be left in the wild?
I would say it can work very well as a hedge if you want to keep out people from invading your garden, or you want to avoid using, if you have a spot that is quite sandy, rather than the clay loam, which is, more of the inland. It does need well-drained soil. It will produce quite a lot of nitrogen. Depends whether or not you like foraging for things like nettles and things, because those nitrogen-rich species will grow around underneath it, things like yarrow. But if you're, quite partial to a bit of nettle soup in the spring, and you're happy to have that nitrogen coming into your garden, it's certainly it's a lovely thing to have to use, and at least something when you trim it back, you can use as much of it as possible. And the wood burns at a very high, long heat. So anyone with a wood fire, it's an excellent source of wood to have for the winter.
Excellent. Any other questions in the audience?
I'm sure we've got time for tasting.
Oh, we've got the room set up afterwards, so
Okay,
once
perfect.
we finish
fine.
as well, we can do that. But do you have a particular favourite part of the plant or application for? I mean, you've talked about loads of different things you can do with it. Do you have a particular
Um,
favourite?
Hard to tell. I say my geeky area, I got very excited about the trichomes because it's an area that within Seabuckthorn it's not very well known. As it's hard to find an area where the Chinese haven't already done all the research. So, found some little bits there. No doubt they will immediately be doing it. Thank you very much, China. But I don't know that we've like the two juices we have. I'm very excited. We've got 3-star Great Taste Award for the Buck Russian, and for the pure juice we managed to get a consistent one for that one. I'm very proud to be making the sea buckthorn oil. It is incredibly laborious because the whole thing is separated by these hands, the seed from the pulp and dried and everything. It's a huge amount of work to produce it, but to be able to produce proper oil that I know exactly what's happened along the whole process, and so I can then show people so that there's so much I don't know the word for it, fakery, fraud that's going on within cosmetics industry. I think it's really important that we actually are able to see what, if it's done properly, this is what it should look like. And if you get sea buckthorn oil that is clear, it's not sea buckthorn oil, or it's really expired, and you certainly shouldn't use it on your face. It should be really dark color. It should immediately almost stain you, and it will go away. It will soak in. It will not continue to stain you, but it should have those bright colors because that's the goodness within it. If anyone's interested in the science of the oils, I have it. I've got um, the full findings, including caffeine, which isn't supposed to be there, but they apparently found caffeine in the seed oil, which is quite interesting. So yeah, those are the sort of areas so far. We've done some beers, some partners on beers and gin. Quite a few different gin companies use them, and they only use one berry for a whole bottle of gin. So from that point of view, I mean that's a no-brainer. If you're a gin distiller and you're wanting to, have, some Orkney berries, then that's it's certainly a good one. Sorry.
Excellent. Any last questions, or is everyone just keen to go and try some tea?
And juice. Yeah. Should we go and do
Yep.
some taste?
Okay, so I'll just wrap up here before we head to the grain air room at the back. As Kirstie mentioned as well, we'd also like to thank the fact that this event has been made possible by the support of the Orkney Islands Council's Crown Estate Community Led Development Fund. You'll see there's some feedback forms scattered around the room, and the QR code. That didn't work. Okay, no, we don't have the QR code at the moment. There's QR codes on the feedback forms. If you could give us feedback on how much you've and hopefully enjoyed this event. It helps us develop and improve the festival going forward. And if you've enjoyed Kirstie's talk, we will look to inviting her back again to see how future developments do go. And also this year, Northlink Ferries have donated a prize for £100 ferry vouchers. So if you send us your feedback, you'll be entered into the prize draw for that. We've also got the chance for festival attendees can also claim a 10% discount in the Orkney Distillery shop and cafe. So if you go in, you can wave your ticket at them and you should be able to get a 10% discount. The next event in here at the Phoenix is the John D. Mackay Memorial Lecture on the Highland River at 2 p.m. this afternoon. We hope you've enjoyed, or you're enjoying the festival so far. We hope you enjoyed the session. Please do like, subscribe, share anything on the various social media platforms. But as for the rest, please join us in the Grainier room at the back and taste some of Kirstie's fantastic wares. Thanks for coming.